Hey folks, Kilt-Man here, Kilt-Man! At your island hopping services once more. How are you all? Hope you're doing very well. Yes, that's rather bright, rather in your face. Because sometimes only the Royal Stewart will do. And it's been one of those days, folks, where I just want to cut a swathe through the throng of life. Not the thong of life. That would be a bit uncomfortable under a bit of woolen tartan. Hope you're all doing very well. Now, in my previous video, I did a requested review for The Island of Lost Souls, L.C. Kenton's 1932 classic horror, controversial, taboo-breaking version of H.G. Wells' classic sci-fi horror novel, The Island of Dr Moreau. And I did say, because it's been filmed 3 official times and 1 unofficial time, but the less said about that one, the better. And only one other version really is worth our time and our efforts, and that would be Don Taylor's 1977 remake, with Michael York playing the castaway shipwrecked on Dr. Moreau's Beastman-ridden island, encountering Burt Lancaster as Dr. Moreau this time out, not Charles Lawton from the first movie, and Nigel Davenport as the guy who runs his colonial estate, a big game hunter. Not a big gay hunter, that would be a different thing entirely. A big game hunter who is on the plonk most of the time. Makes you wonder, because they do say to Michael York, who plays Andrew Braddock, whose ship's gone down at sea, and his little rowboat with 2 other guys, they've both died, he's survived and he's been taken in. 2 days he's been asleep under a mosquito net, and then finally he wakes up and meets these strange people, Dr. Moreau and Montgomery, Nigel Davenport. And they tell him that the next ship coming by there will be one, bringing supplies in about 2 years' time. And it makes me wonder sometimes, how much of this stuff does each ship bring? Because all Montgomery does in this is, well, we do see him in his little shack. He's got a few pipes and a few drips coming out of these pipes and little tin cups underneath. He's got his own distillery there. He's making Hoochmon. So, but I mean, they're well stocked in the larder, they're well stocked in the drinks cabinet. Anyway. So poor Braddock is very quick to realise that something is slightly amiss on the island. There are shapes and sounds in the jungle outside the estate, the stockade, because it's all walled in, and there's a great big, bamboo drawbridge sort of thing which they've got to hoist up. And some of the servants don't look quite right, do they? They've got kind of strange faces, stranger than this face even, and that is saying something. But there is one peculiar delight there as well, played by the luscious Barbara Carrera, in only, I think, a 3rd starring role. And she plays, I think it's Maria anyway, who is the love interest for Michael York. But, in this strange, weird environment, Braddock asks Dr. Moreau, where did she come from? Is she from this island? Oh, no, I brought her here when she was only young. She was for sale for 11 duck eggs and whatever in a basket in Marrakesh or whatever the hell it was, and I brought her here for her own safety. Are you smelling rats? Well, if you've seen the original version with Charles Lawton, yeah, you kind of know where this love could end up. Doggy style. Don Taylor had done Escape from the Planet of the Apes. He'd also done, or would do, The Final Countdown, one of my favourite time travel movies, with Kirk Douglas in charge of the USS aircraft carrier Nimitz, going back on the eve through a time warp to the eve of Pearl Harbor, and the big moral dilemma of what should we do? Should we intervene and change history or not? I've reviewed that film before and I love it. It's trash, but it's bloody good trash. And it's kind of the epitome of Don Taylor's directing style. He's very weapon-like, very efficient director, but there's very little flourish in what he does. And Escape from the Planet of the Apes is by far, as far as I'm concerned, the lesser of the Planet of the Apes original movie cycle. And that one, as well, they all deal with time travel to a degree, but in that one, the apes actually go back in time and encounter, well, what would be modern day America. Anyway, I'm digressing. But with this, he's kind of harking back more to Wells' story, although unlike the original movie, which took on board that Dr. Moreau was dealing with Darwinism and evolution and vivisection, things which were highly controversial back in those days, and well, always are going to be controversial. This version, because it's an update, although it's a period piece, but man had discovered the human gene. So Dr. Moreau is a gene splicer. He doesn't do surgery in his house of pain when he creates his manimals. He's using all sorts of injections and serums. He's found the essence of what is a man, and he's injecting it into these misbegotten, woeful creatures. But of course, the age-old story is that they don't stay human or humanistic for too long. They begin to revert. The beast flesh is stubborn, always finds a way back. When Braddock first sort of wakes up, and he's obviously been at sea for, I think, 17 days, I think it is, adrift at sea, and he's sunburned, and there's a few sores on him, but he's beginning to heal up. Moreau, Burt Lancaster, does sort of look at him and go like, it's remarkable how the skin returns, the flesh repairs itself. He marvels at all this. So gradually he will begin to inform Braddock of what his real agenda is, that this is some scientific outpost far away from the shunning minds of academia, which has despised his methods before and poured scorn upon him, and he's sought an isolated, little bastion, a jungle bastion, and only there will he be able to get away with his experiments. But why is he doing it? Braddock does ask him, why? But why are you doing this? And you never really get a satisfactory answer in this version. He's on about like wanting to know what the connection is between animal and human in their thought process, in their, I suppose you could say, in their soul, in their intellectual capacities. So he's studying this, but he gets enraged whenever these animals revert back to beast-like tendencies. And of course, like in the original film and in the book, outside the stockade is the province of the Beastmen, who live in this. In the original film, there was a village, a big setting, a lovely encampment. But this time around, they live in like a cave, a dilapidated cave. But they are wandering around the island a lot of the time. The island, by the way, was filmed in the lush tropical environs of US Virgin Islands and St. Crux. I think it's pronounced St. Crux. It's that weird word, C-R-O-I-X. Crux? I don't know. Out there somewhere. And it is a great setting, brilliant location photography, and you really get that sweaty, horrible, hot, vapid atmosphere dripping from the screen. Michael York, again, it's one of those things where he's a good leading man and he's a good central character for this. He's a good conduit for us to learn what's going on. But it's also one of these things where how the hell could anyone ever try to keep your experimental secrets quiet from a visitor when just he's staying in that room there in that big colonial mansion, and just spitting distance you've got the House of Pain. Yes, we have a House of Pain, even though Dr. Moreau this time around does not commit vivisection on living creatures. He is injecting serums, but they clearly do, obviously, because they're mutating the body, and quite quickly as well. So these creatures are writhing in agony. This thing's coursing through their veins, transforming them. But Braddock will hear screams and all sorts from this. He'll go investigating. Also in there, he has cages full of animals. Tigers, bears, lions, ocelots, panthers. They're all there. There's loads of them there. Which are obviously, these are what are coming in on these supply ships. And he's then injecting them and making them into humans. Manimals. Humanimals, however you want to call it. And this is where the film does benefit from being in colour and having a lot more close-ups of the creatures. In the original Island of Lost Souls, the makeup by Wally Westmore was fabulous stuff, really, really evocative, and some of his stuff didn't get into the finished film, or if it did, it's in the background because it's too horrific. If you look at publicity stills, I did mention all this, they are really, really effective, very, very creepy, horrifying. But in this, you've got John Chambers. John Chambers worked with Don Taylor before on Escape from Planet of the Apes. John Chambers did all the makeup for all the original Planet of the Apes movies. And so his makeup effects are fabulous, but they all do look like this. Yes, regular viewers will know he's got the bloody Wolfman mask out again. But the reason why I'm showing you this again is because this is the look of most of the creatures. They have that Planet of the Apes thing, the very starkly defined hairline all around the face, the underbite, snout, glaring eyes, and lots of fur all the way around. And they do all seem to look very similar. You have a couple of wolf men, you have bear men, you have pig men, and you have one who's, alright, antagonistic swine. He's the one who in a scene which I don't like at all, he's enraged by Dr. Moreau and he doesn't want to adhere to the laws, because you've got the sayer of the law all over again. In this case, it's Richard Basehart from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, whereas in the original film, it was Bela Lugosi. And Dr. Moreau has his laws. You know, what is the law? Because these are meant to be humans, not animals. Not to walk on all fours, not to eat flesh, not to run wild, and not to shed blood. These are the laws. Are we not men? That's the whole point again. But one of these just doesn't like this whole thing, and witnessing murders or atrocities that are committed by Moreau or under the auspices of Dr. Moreau, he goes crazy and goes on the rampage, goes for a run in the jungle and discovers a tiger. Is this an escaped tiger, or do tigers actually live in St. Crux and the Virgin Islands? I don't know. But hey, it's a fantasy. This is the Island of Dr. Moreau. There's all kind of manner of beasts, flora and fauna out there. But he goes and attacks this tiger, and it's a real tiger, and it's horrible. And he kills the tiger, and it's a huge battle sequence, and it's horrible. But he then gets hunted down. Now that one, he's got horns, and he doesn't half look like Ron Perlman as Hellboy, albeit a different colour. But he is a very Hellboy-esque sort of visage. The effects are great, but you don't see transformations. You will not see bones and skin contorting, but you will see various levels of transformation. So in a way, the film does prefigure, it's like a stepping stone between Planet of the Apes and what you would get with The Howling and American Werewolf, and all the prosthetics and the animatronics and all the skin popping, but air bladders and stuff. But the effects, the makeups are really, really effective, really good. Interestingly, in the original film and in Wells's book, you have a manservant, or a manimal servant called Mei-Ling. And in this, Mei-Ling is played by, and I have forgotten the guy's name. You knew I would at some point. The old brain cells were going to just dribble out. But he's played by a little guy, heavily made up. But he's Burt Lancaster's buddy from several movies in the past, including the awesome Crimson Pirate, where Burt Lancaster was supremely athletic, and his little hairy fella, big beard on him and curly mad hair. That's him again, but he's utterly unrecognisable and harshly treated, as all the manimals are. So, as you can hear, a bit of lush romantic music. This is the soundtrack by Laurence Rosenthal, and it's mostly aggressive, primal, action orientated, but it has a lush theme because obviously Braddock falls in love with, is it Maria? Oh, I hope it is. I think it is. Someone will let me know anyway. But and she wanders around in a kind of sort of reverie. She seems to like it there, just because she doesn't know anywhere else, quite literally. But Braddock begins to argue a lot with Moreau, And then Moreau's going to realise, look, there's no supply ship coming for you, and you're at loggerheads with me. You don't appreciate or understand what my methods are and what my end results are supposed to be. But I need to know what separates or connects human from animal, the civilized man from the beast. So of course he injects Braddock, doesn't he, and straps him down, and he's put the serum into him, so he's going to revert him. Instead of reverting animals, or rather converting animals into men, he's going to convert a man into an animal. But he wants Braddock to describe how it feels to him, his emotions, what he's seeing, what he's smelling, what he's feeling. And in perhaps the most effective scene, the most emotive sequence, Michael York has transformed, and his hair's got a bit shaggier, and his already bulbous nose has widened even more, and he's got a bit more stubble on him. In fact, he looks very similar to how he starts off at the start of the movie, when he's been dishevelled in a lifeboat for 17 days with a bit of stubble and sunburn and messed up hair. It's kind of poetic that he reverts back to that. He already was an animal to begin with. So there's a little theme which probably hasn't been discussed before. But in this heartbreaking sequence, he's in a cage, and Moreau is making notes. He's like, "Go on, tell me how you feel. What is it you see? What is it you smell? What is it you hear? What are your emotions now?" And he's going, "I'm a man. I remember my brother." And they've gone to a frozen lake up in Lancashire, and they sledged down a snowy hill, and he talks about it and going back home in front of the fire and all this, but his brother died. So I remember all this, and it drives Moreau crazy because it's not what he wants to hear. And yet, in a way, isn't that probably the best thing? How long you can retain your humanity and your memories for, isn't that? But it seems to really, really piss Moreau off, who storms off and has more confrontations with the Beastmen, who now are in full revolt, and they haul him off his horse. And in a rather daft sequence, because these Beastmen, are going to just destroy the stockade, because they know it's not good. It hasn't been good to them. His are the hands that make. His are the hands that hurt. His are the hands that heal. Because Moreau does all these things. He creates them, he looks after them, but he will punish them, and then he'll heal them again, to do the whole thing all over again. So they've had enough, basically, and they besiege the place. But they've already killed Moreau, dragged him off his horse and beaten him up and all this, and took a few chunks out of him. In a rather nasty sort of mob riot sequence, they all descend upon him and begin to chomp down. But he doesn't die until he gets dragged back in the stockade. And then, because even though he's now part animal, Braddock, Maria, and a couple of the servants hoist Moreau's body up above the stockade gates. See, he is still alive. He's still alive. He is still the man. Moreau is still alive. And it holds the Beastman in check. He's hanging there with a rope around him, his eyes are open now, and he's just his dead eyes are just contemplating them. And it holds him in check for a little bit. It's time enough for the good guys to try and make a getaway. The scenario here. But in the end, the Beastmen are going to go in, and unlike in the original movie with Charles Lawton, where they drag Moreau into his house of pain and then all exact their revenge by taking the tools of his trade, scalpels, knives, what have you, and then going to town on him. And it's still one of the most effective finales in horror film history, as far as I'm concerned. Very, very emotive and effective stuff. Very powerful. In this, this one tries to be disturbing in its own way, and I don't like the conclusion to this for several reasons. It's not a satisfying payoff, for one, but when the manimals lay siege to the compound, they free all the animals from their cages, but in a rather shocking and slightly, troubling long sequence. Tigers, panthers, the bear, other stuff, just hurtle through this little compound. But these stuntmen dressed as the Beastmen are grabbing hold of these things and being dragged along. They're fighting with them. They're tumbling through windows and through walls, fighting with tigers and leopards. You know, are these animals getting hurt? Because I don't like that. If that's the case, I don't like it. And the American Humane Society may have been looking after or overseeing it. Actually, I haven't checked, but I presume they would have been. But it still looks wrong, and I don't like the tiger fight, and I do not like that conclusion. Of course, Braddock and Barbara Carrera, managed to get to his little lifeboat, which washed him up on the shores of the Island of Dr Moreau, but it had a big hole in it, and he's managed to repair it in secret all this time. So he and Maria managed to paddle away from the island, but the Wolfman, this guy, who in an earlier sequence has actually been quite friendly with Braddock, and all, you know, follow me, follow, because they're chasing the horned guy who killed the tiger, because he is going to be punished, and they all go after him. That's quite a shocking scene as well, because when the Wolfman and Braddock find him, he's obviously injured by his tussle with the tiger, and he knows he's going to be punished, and he begs, you know, no house of pain, no more pain, please kill me. So Braddock, who's got a pistol, does shoot him, and that's the big turning point, because Moreau wanted him back for more experiments, and now you've usurped everything, because that's going to change the ruling regime that he has, because another man because Moreau's told the Beastmen, Braddock is like me, he is in charge as well, he's like Moreau, his hand is the hand that heals and kills and raises whiskey. I kept that kind of tame, really, because these hands can do a lot of things. But so they realise, well, if he can kill and shed blood, these laws are nothing. This is what spurs on the big revolution on the island. But it's a shocking scene where this creature begs pitifully to be killed because he doesn't want to go to House of Pain. But anyway, the Wolfman that helped Braddock track him down then pursues them to the boat, and you have this lengthy finale, this climactic shock sequence where he keeps coming out the water and dragging Braddock into the briny, and the two of them battling around. But he's going to get an oar smacked over his head, and then the oar breaks in two, and the sharp bit gets rammed right into his cranium, and down he goes. Now, I'm going to show you something here. Here's the Blu-ray of it, and there is the novelisation that came out. That's H.G. Wells' original novelisation that came out in conjunction with this version. But if you look at the poster, and the poster's magnificent. I do love the poster. Can you see that with that reflection on it? I'll try and show you on that. A woman's face transforming into a beast. Barbara Carrera in the original ending, which they filmed as well, because I've got photos of her. Michael York is still an animal, but because we've learned that when he turns animals into humans, their humanity begins to fade and the beast flesh will come back. So obviously when a human's been turned into an animal, according to this sort of mythos, the human flesh will return as well. And so he falls asleep as the boat's rocking away into the sunset, and when he wakes up, he's back to normal again. But just in time for a steamship in the distance to start, and he's like waving like that, we're safe. And the original ending had Barbara Carrera turn round with cat-like eyes and fangs, because you knew all along she was an animal as well, like in the original Island of Lost Souls with Lota, the panther girl. That was the same idea, but it was meant to be a shock sequence, and it does draw a bit more on Wells, that with the shock that certain people were in fact animals to begin with, who you didn't expect. But the makers, Don Taylor and the makers and producers, just realised, oh no, we can't end it on a bad note like that. So they've actually cut away. They don't cut well enough, because Michael York, and it would have been a bit daft, Michael York's return to humanity, but she's only a second, she was a beautiful human girl before, is now a sort of panther girl. And just seconds have passed. But what you do see, it's like he's waving, and he says, we're saved, we're okay. And she turns around, and it's a very quick shot before it cuts to a long shot, and then the credits come up. And if you look, her eyes have changed, and she has cat-like eyes. And if the scene hadn't been cut, you would have seen her lips curl back to reveal the fangs. But it's still there to a degree. They haven't quite snipped it all out. But why do that? Why get cold feet again? It's a bit like when I was discussing Island of Lost Souls, a film full of sadism, violence, and horrible depravity. And yet, when it ends, as the escapees flee the island in a little boat, don't look back, the island's all afire. This jaunty, carnival, big-time, ragtime band music comes playing up to try to lift your spirits, alleviate all the tension, and the unease and distress you felt. So, in a way, both makers of both versions of this story so far copped out at the end and tried to it's just a movie after all, don't worry about it. This film is not as disturbing, it's not as scary, it is not as violent, despite the animal fighting that takes place, which is a bit troubling, I think. It's a more of an adventure sort of movie, but even though I said Don Taylor's a bit more of a workman-like but efficient director, there are a couple of sequences of bravura action, like the manimal tiger fight, the big weird finale with everyone's riding animals at high speed through buildings and through windows. It's just crazy. But when Braddock is getting chased through the jungle as well, think to Predator when Arnie's lost all his team and now he's on his own, he's unarmed and he's legging it through the jungle, and the way that John McTiernan films that, very akin, very hyperkinetic. It's exactly the same in this, which came out a decade before. And you've got Braddock running through very thick, overgrown jungle, and you keep seeing fleeting images beside him, and the camera follows him, tracking him, and then cuts to the side, and it's very effective. It's quite a striking set piece. Burt Lancaster gives a measured performance. I love Burt Lancaster. I think he was a fabulous actor, and the first half of the movie, certainly, while he's being nice and he's trying to educate Braddock, it's far more successful for him, because when he lapses into megalomaniacal zeal and everything's about to go tits up for him on the island, he becomes very boring, in fact. And when he has his rant at Braddock, who he's injected, and Braddock's retaining his humanity, Moreau storms off in a rage. It's not very effective. It's not. Lancaster's better than that. So he kind of loses his edge, I think, somewhere along the line in this movie. Michael York, one of Hollywood's strangest pretty boys. I never thought he was a good-looking fella at all, although I know some women do swoon over him, and he's great as D'Artagnan in the 3, 4 and Return of the Musketeers. He's wonderful in those movies, and he's okay in this, but they do think he's a bit of a ladies' man. He goes around with his top undone, so his ripped torso is on show, but he's not that good looking, and he's not that ripped either. So it's just kind of, can you just button your shirt back up again, please? There's Beastmen present, you don't want to excite them. But overall, it's a very likeable version. It differs in the themology, because it's gene splicing, it's genetic codes, and this Moreau does speak in those terms about the signature of the DNA, and he talks about chromosomes and all that kind of stuff, all the bits and bobs inside and how they configure what makes one man tall, one man short, what makes one man with red hair, one man with blonde hair, what makes that, what governs it. I want to change that, I want to break into that code and change it. And that's quite invigorating to hear him talk like this. It's kind of forward thinking as well. It's Wells's idea, but given the new scientific slant, which back in that time period would have been really shocking and groundbreaking. The period in which the film is set, not when it came out, because the 70s, whatever, aliens built everything, chariot to the gods. So, great score, great makeup effects, kind of strange confrontations between man and animal, but that is the theme, I suppose. But I just don't, it leaves it, I look at those sequences now of the animal-man interactions and I don't like it. It just leaves a very, I feel uncomfortable watching those scenes. And the finale could have been better with the proper shock ending. But it's a respectable entry in this cycle of adaptations of Wells. And I think Wells may have preferred this version to the original Island of Lost Souls, which he despised with a vengeance, because he just thought they've took my thought-provoking thriller, my sci-fi epic, into a lurid horror film full of disgraceful antics and bestiality. Well, if you start that ball rolling, people are going to run with it, aren't they? Anyway, folks, I have been and always shall be a Kilt-Man. So please do take it easy. Be happy, be healthy. If you need to, seek out this version too. It's definitely entertaining enough and does keep you going for 90 minutes. But the original is far better. Folks, I'm going to see you all later. What is the law? To drink whiskey and make love. That is the law. And hit the off button properly. That is the law. It's not working. This is the hand that can't work. Stop buttons.